to the core connection. Hopefully this is working this morning. I had to restart the computer, so I apologize for my lateness and technical issues. What can you do? Anyway, today's topic is permission to love. And sometimes we have some underlying agreements that we've made with ourselves or others that prohibit us from welcoming love into our lives. Good morning, Rosalind. So glad you're here. Sorry for the technical glitches. It took us a while to get online this morning. Anyway, before we get started with permission to love, let's take a couple minutes to get present. So let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, your molecules, your electrons, and creating a brilliant beam of light from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together. Rub your hands vigorously against each other and feel the friction, the temperature, the pressure. And when you stop rubbing, feel the buzzing between your hands and allow that to bring you present right here, right now, to this remarkable physical form that enables you to experience life. Good morning. So today's conversation is permission to love. And this comes from a conversation that I had yesterday that unearthed an agreement that someone had with another very special someone in their lives who had passed. And it wasn't even a conscious agreement. It was based on the person who had passed really wanted the full attention of the person with whom I had the conversation with while they were living, and that there was friction around a romantic relationship that was occurring at that time because the person who was dying wanted the attention, wanted the full care, which was willingly and lovingly given. But as a result, there was this lingering agreement, sort of, that this person who had passed had the full love of the person who remained. And that was a deep, deep impediment to their being able to attract the loving relationship that they so deeply desired. And it made me think about the kind of pacts that we make with ourselves or with others around love. You know, for instance, if we've had our heart broken, many of us have made a pact with ourselves that I'm never going to feel like that again. I'm never going to let myself hurt or get involved so deeply that I'm going to get so deeply hurt. And I think that that's probably a pretty common type agreement that we make with ourselves. And then we forget that we've made that agreement and get deeply frustrated about the relationships that show up. So Rosalind says, maybe you've never been shown love or had no role model to inspire you. What we feel we deserve, we will receive back. Yes. Well, good morning, Isabel. Welcome. So Rosalind, yes, I think that's true. If we don't have a model for love, perhaps we don't know what that might be able to be for us. And if we haven't been shown love, then perhaps we believe that we don't deserve it. And in a way, those beliefs are pacts in their own right. That we create these boundaries for ourselves, excuse me. Oh my gosh, I'm so foggy this morning. And it's funny that my computer was slow. Everything is slow this morning. A reflection, we get reflected in the world that we engage with. Interesting, yeah. Anyway, if we believe that we're unworthy of love, then we don't allow ourselves to receive it, right? And if we've made an agreement, if we say, maybe we've had a love and lost that love, and we'll say, I'm never going to love again, or I will love you forever. You will always be number one. So if we make those kinds of agreements, now what do we do? What do we do? Good morning, Gia. Gia says, hello, Mira, Rubin. I now realized I was writing comments, but not in EWN, and I was wondering why you were not reading them. Well, now you know. Thank you for figuring that out, Gia. And thank you for reminding me to let everybody know, if you guys are writing comments and I'm not responding, it's because I don't see them. So if you want your comments to be seen and read, go either to the Enlightened World Network Facebook page or the Enlightened World Network YouTube channel. And I should see the comments from there and I'll respond. So permission to love, when we've had a great love in our lives, then we may pledge, we may pledge ourselves in some way by saying, well, that was my one great love. And so then we're creating a context in which there's no possibility for another great love to emerge, right? Or if we have made this commitment to ourselves that we're never going to let ourselves be that vulnerable again. Good morning, Bernadette. So good to have you here with us this morning. Welcome. It's interesting. When I was 15 years old-ish, I remember saying, I'm never going to get married and I'm never going to have kids because I don't want to put them through what I went through. And for years after that, I really wanted, or thought I wanted, to get married and have children. And I think, it's interesting because now I have not ever gotten married. I have not ever had children. And I am not unhappy about that. And I may at some day, it's unlikely that I'm going to have children, but who knows? Maybe I'll find a partner at some point in my life that I want to spend the rest of my life with. But the thing is that we make these declarations with power and energy, and then we live at the effect of them in many cases, right? Because it's almost like we cast a powerful spell with those declarations for ourselves. And I think that when we are able to bring those declarations or those pledges to our awareness, then we have the ability to break the spell. And you know, in so many ways, our whole lives are lived under different spells. You know, the casting the spell of what we believe reality to be, or what we believe ourselves to be. And when I talk about spells, I'm not talking about witchcraft. I'm talking about just the way that our thoughts and beliefs shape our existence, and giving ourselves permission to love is something that resides on so many levels. And there's such a deep fear of hurt for anyone who has loved, right? Deep, deep fear of being hurt that can serve as a profound impediment. And there's also the notion of loyalty. And if I love somebody else, then it means I loved you less, or I love you less. And we have a capacity to be loving more than one person and more than one way. Bernadette says, I have a friend who is married and terminal, and for the past 3 years, she has set up her husband with a relationship with a wonderful woman. The woman allows my friend to have her space with him, almost like a date. It was weird at first, but it definitely comes from a place of love. Wow, that's pretty radical, Bernadette. Thank you for sharing that. That's really radical. What a gift your friend gave to her husband. She must love him very much to support him in a rich and love-filled life, even knowing that she is passing. Wow, 3 years. That's remarkable. What a story, Bernadette. That's quite amazing. Quite amazing. What a gift. Rosalind says, love is within us all. It's always there. So energy that is freely available if we break down our walls of resistance. That's the whole deal, Rosalind, is allowing us to feel the vulnerability, to feel the tenderness of love. Break down our walls of resistance and realize what we give out, we get back. Like attracts like. Maybe the source of resistance could come from not feeling we deserve what we feel, not loving ourselves enough, and therefore not expecting much in return. Well, that's another part of it for sure, is if we don't consider ourselves worthy, if we have self-hatred or lack of self-acceptance, then perhaps we won't allow ourselves to receive love or to attract love, because we don't believe enough in ourselves. Wow, Bernadette says about her friend, she wanted the best support, love, and friendship for him to be left with. Bernadette, what a beautiful person she must be. That's really quite amazing, quite amazing. But back to what you were saying, Rosalind. When we allow ourselves to love ourselves, to love others, we do open our hearts to the potential experience of profound, profound connection. And also the joy and agony that can come from that depth of connection, and the entanglement with another. There are so many different ways that we can, or that so many levels of on which we experience and express love, right? Like love can be kind of an addiction, and like that's obviously, if that's the case, it's not the purest form of love. We can, love is such a complex topic, isn't it? I think we often confuse love with codependence, or neediness, or possessiveness, possession, ownership. And it's interesting when we talk about loving unconditionally. I think most of the love that we experience in life is somewhat conditional. Unconditional love is sort of a space of transcendence, right? Anyway, I thought it was very interesting and important for us to recognize what might be underlying our permission for ourselves to love. So it as I'm thinking about it, it feels like love and loss are often very paired in our experience, and love and loyalty are also very paired. Love and expectation, love and trust. So, Isabel, so good to have you here with us. It was great for you to be with us. Thanks for being here. Bernadette says, I think we need to allow ourselves to be vulnerable, to accept the love without allowing the past hurts to take the forefront. Exactly. And that's, I think that is much more easily said than done, because I know for myself in the past, I have lost myself in attachment. I'm going to say attachment more than love even, because when those relationships dissolved, there was such it felt like part of me was ripped away, and there was just such a profound sense of loss and disorientation, given that my relationships were very codependent, and entangled and needy. So Bernadette says the fear of being alone. Yeah, that could be a big part of it too. I mean, it's interesting because most of my life I've been by myself, and I have an independence and a sense of myself and what would happen in the past. This was a long time ago, because maybe my sense of self wasn't as well developed at that time, but I would, maybe partly because of being so empathic, I would get so entangled with another person that when we split, there was such a disorientation. I would lose myself in relationship, and then when that relationship disappeared, I was just completely at a loss. And also all the insecurities and the self-loathing and all of that got to rise up, and the blame and shame, and it just was this very, very entangled, messy dynamic of past and projection and all of the stuff that I associated with love, but it wasn't. I don't think it was, for me in the past, a healthy love in any way, shape, or form, right? So when we make these pacts about I'm never going to whatever, or well, I'm never going to love as much, I'm never going to allow myself to be hurt like that, I'm never going to whatever. When we make these kinds of pacts, they have a holding power until we allow ourselves to recognize them and kind of dig them up at the root. So Bernadette says, I call that the 7 steps of separation. Interesting, Bernadette. So I'm wondering if you would be willing to share what the seven steps are. I think that sounds fascinating. Another thing that came up yesterday, I'm going to go a little longer since I got a late start this morning. Another thing that came up is that when a relationship is dissolving, we get to be really attentive and carefully curate the stories that we make up about it. Because another situation was with someone who's in a relationship that is breaking apart, and it's breaking apart due to truly irreconcilable differences. One person has a deep desire, the other person has a deep desire. Those two deep desires are in direct conflict, and there's not really a reconciliation of those two deep desires. And the story that one person was making was that they were not being chosen, that they were being discarded. And it was really interesting to be looking at that story versus the story of, no, I'm choosing for myself, and this dynamic is not in alignment with what I need, where they were the ones that were choosing versus the person that wasn't being chosen, and in other words, they weren't choosing the other person. And it was so interesting to watch the dynamic and the different emotions that this person experienced as they inhabited the two different stories. Because the one story was being not good enough, being rejected, being denied. And the other story was being in alignment with self and choosing. It was still sad because there's lots of love there and there's lots that works. But it was a very different experiential context to be living in relation to these stories. And it's very easy for us to say we want something and feel that we want it wholeheartedly, while at the same time we bring in mitigating emotions. In other words, we reside in the yes, but I want this, I really want this, but whatever the but energy is mitigating our desire for something. And this is really, really cool. With one of these same people, they were working on manifesting something. And it was really interesting in the conversation. They were working on manifesting this thing. They created all this wonderful emotion and visualization. And then they said, but I want it now. And so that I want it now was the but part. It was it was adding resistance into the visualization, the experience, and mitigating the positive energy. So we kept coming back to that and saying, okay, you get to experience it now. Forget, like the I want it now, or I want it soon is kind of affirming that it doesn't already exist, right? So we kept working with it. It was wild because right after the session, the thing manifested, which was miraculous. It was amazing. It was amazing. But the thing, what it took was getting rid of that mitigating energy. And that's really what we're talking about when we're talking about permission to love, is that there's mitigating energy for so many of us around giving ourselves permission to not only love, but to be loved. So Bernadette says, denial, blame, negotiation, memory balance, acceptance, and disconnect from the relationship. Okay, these are the 7. All right. Denial, blame, negotiation, memory balance, acceptance, and disconnect. Wow. Really interesting, Bernadette. I haven't been aware of that. And it sounds like it might actually be related to, is it Simone de Beauvoir? The 7 stages of grief. I'm wondering if that's related. I don't know. Anyway, thank you for that. So I think what we get to do is to look when we're giving ourselves permit. Thank you, Bernadette. Awesome. So when we give ourselves permission, or we are desirous of love, that we get to look at what are the energies, what are the mitigating energies that we're holding at the same time that we're holding the desire. And those mitigating energies are the things that are going to inhibit the desire from manifesting, right? So if we can identify and clear those mitigating energies, then we have a clear path to being able to experience the desired experience, love, whatever it is. And so unearthing some of these pacts that we may have made with ourselves or with others, like this was a revelation for the person that that I was talking with, to say, oh my gosh, he had made a pact with this other person that he was never going to love someone as much as he loved them. And what we did was we enabled him to have a conversation with this other person, and they gave their blessing. And it was profound. It was so profound and transformative for them. So anyway, giving ourselves permission on all levels, and the same thing goes with abundance too. Bernadette says, I'm sure it was eye-opening for that person. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Thank you, Bernadette. Thank you so much for your input. Rosalind says, thank you for your love. It is felt, the gift of your presence and opening perspectives to interesting concepts to ponder. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Rosalind. Thank you, Bernadette. Thank you, Isabel. Thank you, all of you who are joining us and engaging in these conversations. And I'm just so grateful to you. And I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection. I go live each weekday morning here on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel at 9 a.m. Eastern. And I invite you to check out the other awesome programming on Enlightened World Network, EWN One with the Earth, and Enlightened World Living. And until next time, so much love to you.